Let's learn about 18th century dancing. The dance you are seeing here.
How many historians, or maybe just social media managers, do you have to employ to get history this wrong? We can dispense real quick with about the history of dancing in the 18th century. Colonial Virginia was not Jane Austen. It wasn't even Bridgerton. Almost all of the dances, they were for upper classes versus lower classes. It was a competition. Jesus Christ, it's not Sense and Sensibility. That period of Virginia, all of those balls, we've got lots of evidence of this. They're all by subscription. They're all run by tavern owners who need to fill their function rooms with activities. Sometimes that's a magician. Sometimes that's a ventriloquist. Sometimes that's a speaker. Sometimes they go ahead and if they find some itinerant musicians and they put on a dance and they sell tickets. You can afford the ticket. You can go to the dance. We have plenty of evidence of this. Nobody is having their credit checked at the door. You know what you have to be? You have to be free and white. There you go. That's it. This is Mount Vernon creating yet another cosplay world in which that is divorced from reality. It's a cosplay fantasy land. It's a colonial white cosplay fantasy land. Which leads us to the bigger point. There is no room in that part of Virginia at that time, no room that is not populated by black faces. So they have taken a notional eraser all around the edges of a room like that to erase all of the black faces that would have been making all of that possible. Standing there to wait on these people hand and foot, being owned by the tavern owner, being owned by the forced labor camp owner who might be holding these might be holding these for fun. Either way, there is no room of any kind where the blackness of your history can be avoided. No matter how hard places like this try to go ahead and erase the central organizing dimension of the period. Enslaved black exploitation. It's everywhere. And in these parts of Virginia, they outnumber the white people. This effort that Mount Vernon and Colonial Williamsburg and Monticello have to overtly create this world in which there are no black faces, in which there is no reference. It can be a cozy aesthetic that white people can just cuddle up to and pretend this is a chapter in Pride and Prejudice. And boy, are they trying to go ahead and catch the eye of Mr. Bingley. Didn't happen. So why are they doing it? Obviously, this is about revisionism that is there not as a part of maybe an ideology, although it might be, but is there as a matter of convenience for them and their audiences. But here is my question, particularly to teachers. And I know teachers who are my mutuals who have taken their students there, and value teachers who are my mutuals who have a lot of thoughts about this. But my question is to teachers, how can you justify exposing students to this garbage? How can you justify spending taxpayer dollars through your schools to go ahead and take them to a place that is just going to lie to them about what those life and times were like? To, at best, tokenize the experience of enslaved Americans. To tokenize the experience in the presence of black people. To absolutely and positively distort them in ways that you then have to work to unpack. Instead of saying to them, you know what, before we go, I'm going to tell you about Oni Judge, and I'm going to tell you what she said about the Washingtons. I'm going to tell you about all the people who ran from the Washingtons. I'm going to give you the words out of George and Martha's mouths about what they thought about black people. And then we're going to have a discussion about the centrality of enslaved people to their very existence, and then go and ask why you're not seeing it all around you, and go and ask why when they present this kind of content to project their idea of history, to project these kind of jokes for historians that they seem to have on staff. How can you justify that? Except as an exercise in sparking your students' critical thinking and critical engagement with history accountability. You are getting this wrong. Why are you harming the memory of these people? Why are you being so insulting to the people who made this place possible by centering the experience of white people in the first place and be creating scenarios that never existed because you think that audience, that white audience, that oh so white audience desperately wants. They want it to be a Jane Austen novel. You know, the other day, Mount Vernon held and they like doing stuff like this, right? I mean, they held a conference about, well, what can be done to save democracy? You know, and the heads of Monticello were there, the heads of Montpelier were there. Montpelier posted about it to talk about how it's important to save democracy. Do you want democracy in the hands of these people? They don't get the past, which they're ostensibly responsible for. They assumed responsibility for an important part of the past. They are purposefully misrepresenting that to their audiences, to students, old and young, of that period, of that moment, of the moment of creation. They are purposefully misrepresenting that to you. Why would you trust any of them to properly represent the present and the relationship between that past and this present? You want them talking about democracy, representing a place that actually stood against democracy? Because they don't seem at all to be interested in representing it authentically. Every single post is a lie, and those lies get bigger and bigger and bigger. Every single time they want to represent the 18th century, they get it wrong. And then they get it wrong in not just little ways. No dances like this. No. But they get it wrong in fundamental context about how these places worked. That accountability has to be stepped up. And so I want to know from my mutuals who are teachers, how do you justify emboldening this approach by continuing to expose students to these lies that you then have to unpack? So many of my mutuals who are teachers are such great historians on their own. And I know that they don't want to have to deal with this, but when these places are stepping it up to lean into the whiteness of their history and to erase the blackness of it, that blackness that made it possible, how do you keep doing it? How do you keep doing it? Let me know, because I am interested.